Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to cover a very important topic, and that is about handling configuration in your test frameworks. This topic is very important. Why? Typically when you want to build your framework, you want your test to be able to run on any test environment. May it be localhost environment, may it be develop environment, may it be staging environment. So you basically want your test to be environment agnostic, right? And if you hard code values like base URLs or test data in your test, they would not be test environment agnostic, right? Because now your test might only run for one test environment, but it would not run for another test environment. And in today's topic, we're going to see how you can handle that. The solution that we're going to use is something called Typesafe. It comes from Lightband. I will put the link of this URL in the description so you can go, in your own free time. I will directly show you like how to implement this. The first thing that you need to do is you would need to basically copy this dependency. So let's go back and go to a POM file. And I think I already was experimenting with it. So I added Typesafe here. And this is the version that I put here, right? So let's go back. What else? So let's start by by creating our problem statement. So let's say if you want to have different test environments like develop, staging, or localhost, let's create different directories for those. So let's create a directory for localhost. Let's create a directory for your develop environment. Let's create a directory for your staging environment, right? And since we're talking about the environments, let's go ahead and even create an enum so that, if somebody gives an invalid choice, you will say that, hey, these are the only environments which are supported. So let's go to Java and let's create a new package. Let's call it as org. I'm calling it Power Tester. That's my one-man company. And let's call it as config, right? Because it's going to capture all your config. And let's create a new Java class, which is going to be enum, and we are going to call it as test environment class, right? I will add it later. Let's add an enum called localhost. Let's add an enum called develop, and let's add an enum called staging. For now, this is what we need. What else? So typically what happens is like in any project, you will have some common configuration and you will have some configuration which varies as per environment. So common configuration can actually be stored. And before I create this file, let's just go to Typesafe. And if I scroll down, go give a read to this particular section. It says application config typically contains all common application configuration. So let's go to Windows 1 and let's create a new file here, new file application config, and you can mention that this is the place where you put all your common configuration that does not change with test environment, right? So for example, things like endpoints can come here. And by the way, normally I like to say that if you're giving configuration for endpoints, you can say endpoints starts with a / and ends without a /. This is just an information, like if somebody wants to create it. So like if you're working in a team, you typically want to give some sort of guidance. So let's say if I'm creating an employee endpoint, let me call it employee endpoint, and this could be, let's say, employee, right? Like that's an endpoint. If you want to create a admin, just giving examples here. So that it becomes a little bit more realistic. Admin endpoint, and you can say like create an admin. By the way, Typesafe also allows you variable substitution, and the way you can do it is if you say create employee endpoint, you can actually now reuse this, and you can say dollar for this, and then you can with string, and you can say, for example, create. By the way, this is not a good example because typically you should not have verbs in an endpoint. But well, imagine if this was not create employee endpoint but something else, right? You can do an variable substitution here. That's all I wanted to mention. What else? Typically, like what happens is in a framework, there are things that you don't want to change and there are things that you really want to change, like giving test environment choice. And you can, even though provided here, but in the past I used to give something called choices.configuration, but I feel I just have to write extra code to parse it. And I was looking if I can use something from Typesafe itself, so that I can use that as my choices.config. And I think reference.conf is a file which makes sense to just give my choices. So if I go back, let's create another file and let's call it reference.conf, and you can actually say you can put all your user choices here, right? So for example, things like test environment, and let's say if I say localhost. By the way, guys, you might have observed that I'm using snake case and like all capital letters in configuration. Why? Because all these things are constants. They're not going to change. Like once you pick the test environment, these values are not going to change. And because the convention for constants in Java is to use all caps snake case, that is what I'm using here. And because now we know that our configuration choices are localhost developer staging, that's the configuration choice which I provide. In fact, just for testing purposes, let's see if I give a wrong config choice. Localhost, even though it's the same name, but it's not the same enum name, so it should fail. So let's keep it like this. And then let's take another common examples of, and you can say your valid environment choices are, and then you can say localhost, develop, and staging. Guys, I expect this video to be a little bit longer because there's a lot to be covered. But once you this is a very important video, and if you stick with me till the end, once you learn this solution, you can use this solution for any kind of frameworks like mobile, UI, or API automation, and you don't even have to change anything in the code. So like once you have the code, you just have to copy paste it, and it works. It would work out of the box every time. Let's go back to our develop localhost staging, and let's put some realistic examples of what things should change where per test environment. So one thing that I can imagine of is let's say your test data, and if you'll see, I'm choosing some sort of naming conventions everywhere. Let me first name it, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing here. So this is naming files as kebab case. So normally files are named as kebab case. In Java, the classes are named as Pascal case. The variables are named as camel case. The constants are put as snake case, right? So bear with me. Like these are important things to take care of, because another person who understands this convention will be greatly helped if you follow these conventions. So let's say how do you say environment specific test data comes here, right? And then, for example, you can say admin login, and this could be, for example, admin, and admin login might not be a good thing to put here, because a good place to put such things is actually in secrets.conf file. So secrets.conf file, and you might say, hey, I'm putting at that I'm just putting everything in plain text. How does it matter? It does matter. Like, we have solutions using which we could encrypt this secrets file. There's something which I can cover in another video. But for now, imagine if you have an admin login ID, you can put admin, and if you have admin password, your password can come here. Yeah, it could also be admin. Environment specific secrets comes here. These will be encrypted so that only people who have access can view them, right? Let's go back to test-data.conf. So let's call it as admin name, and let's call it as John. Let's call it as John. Okay. So with this, now we got examples of typically what things comes inside test environments, what things comes inside common configuration like endpoints, what things are like choices that you want to keep separate from the configuration, so that you know exactly what things you are always tweaking with. Like in case of UI automation, it could be your browser choices like Safari, Chrome, or Firefox. Those can come here in reference. So let's now just go ahead and copy these things also in localhost, paste, and I'm not adding it to Git yet. Admin login, this could actually be local admin, for example, and this could be local admin. Admin name, this could be John, this could be Wick, and let's copy this, put this in staging, paste. In fact, let's call them something that's easier to remember. So let's say local user, let's call this one as admin user, so that when we're creating test, we can also easily find out where are these values coming from. So this is staging admin, test data, and let's call it as staging user, right? That's what we have called everywhere. Admin user, local user, and secrets is how I changed, yeah, local admin, Okay, I think now we have got good amount of good amount of examples of what different kind of test data can lie in different kind of files. Now let's go ahead and just create a test environment factory, which should basically give us depending on whatever environment we have chosen, it should give us the configuration for that particular environment. And the design pattern in Java for doing such kind of things is a factory pattern. So that is what we are going to name our test class. So let's call this as test environment factory, because it is going to give us configuration for different environments depending on whatever choice we have picked, either from command line or whatever we have specified in our reference.conf file, right? Another thing that I want to emphasize is, like, once we want to run our test, for that particular test run, we do not want to change our test environment configuration. Like, I've seen some examples where people try to set environment configuration and get environment configuration during the run cycle of the test. In my opinion, that's just a anti-pattern, and that's and that would just make your life difficult. Because imagine when you're trying to run multiple tests in parallel, and one test is trying to set a property, other test is trying to get the property. Like, there's no way you can control it, right? And what will happen is you will start seeing all these kind of weird issues, and I would just advise not to do it. So I would in fact say, once you have specified your configuration, once you have specified your choices, once you passed your parameters from command line, do not change your parameters. And what that means is, we want this configuration to be common and constant for like the whole test run. And what that means is, you basically want to create something called a singleton pattern. Now, in test community, a lot of people use singleton patterns very heavily. Using singleton patterns is considered as more of a anti-pattern, guys. So only use it when there's a good use case for it. If there's not a good use case, please do not use it. One more thing which I want to add about singleton pattern is, there are at least 3 to 4 ways in which you can implement singleton pattern. I'm going to just implement one of those, but if you want to learn about multiple singleton patterns, there's a very good book called Java Design Patterns from Head First series, which can tell you, like, how you can create those multiple singleton patterns. One that we are going to implement is we are going to basically create an instance of the class during compile time, so not during runtime. And that would always make sure that whenever you're trying to get an instance of this particular class, you can be 100% sure that there would be no multiple threads fighting for creating that object. So it is a thread safe solution. So the way we are going to do this is, we are going to first create a private static final instance for our test environment factory, and we are going to call it as a unique instance, and we are going to say, hey, create a new test environment factory. So basically, this command will run at the compile time, and you can be 100% sure that the instance, like this object, would be created at the compile time. Now, another thing that you want to do is, with factory patterns and with singleton patterns, you do not want people to allow to create another instance of this object. So you want to create your constructor private. So you want to say private test environment factory, and now you're 100% sure that nobody else would be able to create an instance of it. If you want to say, just want to be explicit, do not want anyone to call this constructor, right? Let's just go ahead, and then we want, now basically what you want to do is, we want to return this unique instance. So you want another method which is, let's say, public static, and you want to return this instance test environment factory, and you want to call it as get instance. And by the way, guys, this is just textbook definition of how you implement a singleton pattern. This is one of those approaches of creating a singleton pattern. And I'm going to say return unique instance, right? So with this, you have created an instance. You are not allowing anyone to create another object of this class, and with this method you can actually get the instance. So now let's just go ahead and implement the behavior. So the real magic will now happen here. What we want to do is, we want to have get config, and we want to say get config alt enter, import class, and we want to import Typesafe config, right? And let's just go ahead and see how we want to do it. So the way you can do it is, let's go to Windows 3. It says the standard behavior of loading the configuration is config factory.load. So if I copy this URL, let's go back, and I'll put a comment here. Standard config load behavior is specified here, and what this behavior says us is, that if you do config factory.load, you can load the config. And what this says is if you do config factory.load, it loads the configuration. So let's just create an object called config and config factory.load, Windows 1, config factory.load, okay, and this will basically load what all it will load. It will load your application config and it will load the reference.conf, right? So let's go back and let's for now just return this config. Let's keep it very simple. So at this moment we are able to capture application config, so we can basically get all these endpoints and we can get the reference config. Let's just test it out. Let's go to our test sandbox class. Let's create a new class, alt insert test method, and let's just say insert that. We can get user config. Okay, alt enter, enter, and typically what you want to do is you want to get config and you want to have a config variable, and then you want to say test environment factory dot get instance get config, and with this you have got a hold of the config object. We already have got slf4j, so let's see if we can do a log info on config. Oops, it's a constant config dot get string, and let's try to get what is it, test environment, right? Test environment. So let's just go ahead and run this test environment. Let's see what happens. Okay, it gives us localhost. So this tells us that reference was picked. Now let's see if we can also test something else. Maybe this one. This is more interesting. Let's go to test sandbox, Control D, and let's see what happens now. If I put the syntax correct, we should be able to get both these variables. Okay, it picked up the right syntax. So employee.create, and this is where you can see the variable substitution takes place and you can avoid code duplication. If tomorrow somebody changes this name, and if it is referenced in 10 different endpoints, you only have to change it in one place, and that's it. Let's go back. Let's try to add more intelligence to our test environment class. So let's close all other tabs. So this is good enough if we only want to capture application and reference config, but we also want to make sure that we are able to pick our configuration from different test environment files. So what do we need to do that? What do we need to do then? What we want to do next is we actually want to get our test environment, right? And the cool thing is you don't have to get test environment as a string. You can actually get it as an enum value. So if I give it as test environment, and if you say config dot get enum, and if you say test enum dot class, and if you then say that I want this field called test environment, which by the way at this moment is wrong, so it should fail, but that would be a good test. So let's put it here, and based on this test environment, I actually want to parse all the files which are inside the repository for that particular environment, right? Like that's what I want to do. So based on this, I want to actually get the test environment directory path, which would be, let's say, string dot format, and what we want to do is we actually want to copy this file path. So let's say if I copy path from content root, so let's call this. We do not want to hard code this one, so this would be %s. And let's take this as test environment. This would give us the path, right? What you want to do next is, based on this particular path, we want to capture all the files which are inside this particular environment repository, depending on whatever we have chosen. And today it is only secrets.conf and test-data.conf. But tomorrow, if you can think of another file which based on which you want to differentiate your configuration for each environment, you can create it, and the same code will work for it. So then let's just go ahead and create a test environment directory, and let's call new file and give this path. This would basically give us all the files inside this particular directory. And now what you want to do next is, we want to iterate basically all the files which are inside this particular test environment directory, and we want to basically list all the files, right? So now we want to basically iterate all these files, and what do we want to do? We want to get the config, and which is basically a child config. This is what we want, and we want to say go from config factory and load. Now again another configuration, but this time we want you to load not like so it does not accept, by the way guys, it does not accept the full path. Maybe I should have shown this. So when I say load, it says you have multiple load methods, and the one that we want is no, the one that we want is the resource path. So let me go back, load the resource base name. This is the one that we want. So we want to basically provide the resource base name, and the resource base name, this one. And the resource base name is not the full path, but it is the path which is inside the resource. And the way the way you provide it is by not giving the full path, but just by providing like this particular like this particular directory and this particular file name. So for example, if I put it in a very crude manner, it would be your test environment plus this plus whatever file we have and its name. Now we don't want to put it like this, so let's just put this all inside string.format, and let's call it as %s %s, and then you pass test environment, and then you pass file.getName, right? Let's get rid of all this junk. This will basically give you the child config, and the command which you can use to merge both the configuration is let's go here and let's call it as config is equals to config dot with fallback, and then you can provide this child config, and this will give you a merged config. So every time you run this, like every time this is iterated, it is merging all the configuration into into this main configuration. So now let's try to just go ahead and run this test again. I expect it to fail, by the way, because the test environment is given as localhost, and this is not a correct value, right? Which is good. It says should be one of localhost this. Your environment choices should be one of these. So let's provide it like this, and let's run it again. And this time it ran absolutely fine, but we have not yet checked for the values. So let's see, if we provide localhost, we expect to get the values coming from localhost, right? So let's add 2 more tests, test sandbox, control T, admin login, and let's see if it picks secrets or not. Local admin, right? Pretty cool. What else? We want to also check that. We also want to check if it's picking up the test data or not. So let's go back. Admin name, let's run it again. And admin user, was it admin user? Yeah, it was. So let's call it local admin user. Local admin user. What else? I also want to show some other things. So now like we have already seen that, depending on whatever value we pass, it picks up the right configuration. But let's say if I change this value from localhost to develop, just to make sure, and just to demonstrate that it works fine with changing the choice also. Now it's picking the value from develop, and I think in develop the name is wrong, so it should be develop user. Cool. So it seems to be working fine. I also want to demonstrate a few more things before I wrap up this video, and that is, like, let's say if you also want to pick things which are not just strings. We already saw how you can also get values like enums. Like in this particular case, you're directly getting the value as enum. But if you also want to get values like as integers, or like floating numbers or booleans, all that is possible. So if you call it as let's say toggle, yep, and if you want to call it as false, or if you want to put it as okay, I've done the toggle. Okay, if you want to put something as number of users, if you want to put it as 10, if you want to say price, and if you want to say 123.456, what else? So integers, booleans, strings. We already have strings. What else? I think let's create these three, and then I can also show. We can just quickly look and see, what all options are available. Application config, number of users, and price, test box, price. And instead of doing it as a string, now I can actually do it as get boolean, right? So this should give me, and now of course it's complaining because it's a log info statement. So what I can do is I can wrap it using string info, but this will give you boolean value if you want to work with booleans. So for example, if you want to capture this into a boolean flag, you can capture this value as a boolean flag, right? How cool is that? Let's put this here, and of course to print it, we have to put in string value of let's see, number of users, get int. So this again, you can do the same thing just for saving time. I will just now wrap it here and get float, or let's say get double, and alt enter, wrap using value of. And just for the sake of seeing what all options are available, if you do get, these are all the options available, guys. You can have string, boolean, config, enum, double, bytes. You can get even time, duration. You can get a list. You can get numbers, objects, period, string, values, like that there are a ton of options that are available here that comes out of the box from Typesafe, which you can use directly then in your code to basically run your test. So let's just go ahead and run it. Right, so let's say if I want to, so now you can see it's picking up the boolean flag, it's picked the integer, it picked the floating value. I just want to check one more thing, and that is, let's say if I now want to override this value as maven clean test, and if I give it as test environment equals to staging, I want to see what happens, right? I want to basically see if staging is being picked up or not. True is true, expected day, but was not, which is fine. I'm interested in getting this. So as you can see, guys, when I try to override this value, even though the value was developed here, when I overrided this value with staging, that was the value which was basically parsed by this configuration factory, right? Pretty awesome. If I give this as localhost, now the value localhost is picked. And why is it important? Because you will have one version of your choice in your local environment, but when you want to run basically when you want to specify your CI pipelines, at that time, depending on which pipeline you want to run your test from, like developer staging, you want to override those values. And then it's cool to see that those values are overridden and you get the right values, right test data, right secrets, right everything picked up in your test environment. And now with this, you've actually made your test as environment agnostic, right? Now this is super powerful, guys. Now, depending on n number of test environments, if you separate your test configuration from your test, you have now very flexible test framework that can run in multiple test environments. Let me quickly see if I give this as a wrong, like unexisting test environment. We can also see that we will get the right failure, and it will fail complaining that, hey, this is not a good choice. So let's go back, and it says where was it? Invalid value, because this is the place where it throws the error, right? So it should be one of the localhost developer staging values, which is cool because it's an invalid environment. It's not being parsed. There's just one last thing which I want to mention, guys, and that is, let me go back. Where is the code? Here. That now we have got, I think, close to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code. And as you can see, if you want to drop another file for whatever reason, like that's all you have to do, like Control C, Control V, and if you say what could be another thing which is environment agnostic, let's say, I know base URLs are, but probably base URLs are something that you might put it as a part of your secrets. But let's say user info, like I don't know, if another thing tomorrow comes up, and if you want to call it as username, all you have to do is just drop these files into this environment, guys, and let's say user info, local user. Now this was develop user, and all you have to do is drop this file everywhere, and that's it. You don't have to change anything in the code anymore. Paste, and let's put this as staging. Let's do a quick run. Control C, username. Okay, let's do a quick test, and let's see if it works. username is type string, of course, rather than number. So this is not, so this is just get string. And it's also a good test that, you cannot just use anything to say, hey, give me a double with a string. So Typesafe is intelligent enough to give you the right errors, when there's a need for that. So that's it, guys. Like with this, you can see Typesafe is a very powerful, very neat solution that can help you with handling your test configuration and test data in a very neat way. This way, using it, you can build your test frameworks which are test environment agnostic. And what it means is it can run in multiple test environments. This particular class is something that you can just use it as out of the box. If tomorrow you want to decide to add a new test environment, just add the environment here, and that's it. You would not need to change anything anywhere in the code, and this code would run out of the box, and it would run for all kind of test environments, UI, mobile, and browser. So if you hanged in with me for for a long time, I know it's a very long video, so if you still hanged in with me till the end, I appreciate that. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I look forward to see you guys in another video. Have a good day. See you. Cheers. Bye-bye.